Hi, I'm Lou Scott, and this is the Geppetto Room, where you don't have to be creative to be creative, you just have to be you. Now, most other times I'd be here sharing ideas about making better, more creative decisions. That's what the show is all about. But today, I don't have a goddamn idea what we're here for. So I'm going to turn it over to these people on my desk here. I don't know who invited them, but here they are. So it's their show, more Geppettos.
All right, so thank you. So full disclosure, I'm not Santa Claus with a bun and a white beard. Mr. Scott Alaro's Lou Scott, the Geppetto Room host. I'm his son, Christopher. So that's me, Christopher Scott. Scott Alaro is the real Italian name. We'll go right down the line here. Introduce yourselves, gentlemen, and then we'll go to questions.
All right. My name's Will Gormley, and I've been in the Rutland City Rotary Club with Lou Scott for many a year, and I consider him a good personal friend.
I'm Reed Wilcox, and I too am also in the Rotary Club with Lou. That's where I met you, and I'm honored to be here and looking forward to asking you some questions, turning the tables around on you.
And my name is Bill Schubart. I'm from Heinsberg. I've lived in Vermont since 1947. I'm not in Rotary. They wouldn't let me in. And
Not yet.
I'm a writer and a columnist for Vermont Digger and an ancient friend of Lou Scott here, and I'm honored to be here.
So I don't have any credentials. Today, my only credential is I'm Lou's son. Poppy, he's affectionately known, the Diorama Man, and also this is the Geppetto Room where everybody can be creative. So, as Reed said, this is all about asking you questions about a variety of topics, socially, politically, personally, Rutland-y.
And I have the right to deny answers.
You can say
I also
anything
have the right
you'd
to
like.
lie. I
Correct.
can lie, okay?
Yes.
You understood that I could lie
No, you
or
can't.
not
You're
answer.
In fact, you could song and dance or sing. This is either going to be, I don't think it's going to be the last Geppetto show. We haven't done one in a while, the Geppetto Room. So maybe this will be the beginning of a whole new era leading into 2025. So, as I've known you my whole life, right?
Right.
Ostensibly your whole life. I grew up with enigmatic parents, so both Lou and my mother Brenda have been very, very creative people my entire existence on this planet. So, I have two basic questions. Okay. When did you know that you were going to live a creative life? Not that you were going to be the New York ad man and medical devices and LSA. We can talk about that. When did you know that you were a very creative individual?
Very early in my, this is a lie, very early in my high school career, I was being paid. I had a little business. I was writing porno stories for everybody else. And I realized that the guy said, this is very good stuff. And I kept writing it and they kept paying me. And that's when I realized I was creative. I didn't go into the business, but that's what the first started.
Okay,
out.
is that a
That's a
truism?
lie.
That's a lie. Okay, so give us the truism. Here, let me say it like this. Daniel and Charles is a story that I always grew up with. The Madison Avenue. Okay, that was the beginning of your advertising business in Manhattan. Because a lot of people might not know that Lou was one of those old-time 1960s, 70s ad men at a time when medical device advertising, you ran his own business called Louis Scott Associates. And so that's where a lot of great creativity came from. We all worked for him over the years. So tell us a little bit of the story about either were you fired in an elevator at some point that led you to opening up your own business?
How did I get in my own business? Very
Correct.
simple. I got out of the Army, and then I had 8 or 9 jobs from which I was always fired. And the last job I was fired from was, I think, General Electric Credit. And the guy gave me the best advice. He said, look, Lou, you got to go in your own business. You're not a team man. You're not a team guy. You got to go in your own business, otherwise you're going to, and that's how I went in my own business.
And what was
I
that
was
business?
always getting fired because I always disagreed. And
Is that because you had a lot of opinions about how to be creative?
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
I would say that. A lot of
Okay.
opinions. Right or wrong, I had a lot of opinions.
So this is my last question. You can circle back to me. We're going to go right
Right.
down the line. When did you first go into business, and how long were you the president of Lewis Scott Associates, Inc.?
Over 50 years, I still am. I went into business in 1968, and we ran a boutique agency against big guys. And the only way you could exist in New York City advertising as a boutique agency is you had to have a lot of creative ideas. So we built ourselves as we had a better creative ideas. And a lot of big agencies would come to us and say they wanted my ideas, and I said, fine, but I have to see the client. And if they said, no, you can't see my client, then I wouldn't give them the idea. I lost a lot of business that way, but.
My memories were always at 22 East 21st Street in Gramercy Park. You were surrounded by some of the most potent creative people I could ever imagine, and you was the head. Okay, so you're up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Will is up.
Ask away.
So we got tasked to come up with some interesting questions to probe what makes you you, and so we put it out to the Rotary Club, and we got some responses back. And so we've got
Say
some
them out loud.
We got some here on the
And
table.
I could lie, okay.
Yeah, you can pass, you can lie. The audience even has some questions. But I don't know. I think we should start with a softball question, which is, where did your obsession with Santa Claus come from?
Good
It's a
question.
sad story because when I growing up, I never had a Santa. I never had Christmas. My father's idea of Christmas was to give you $10. He'd give everybody $10, and that was it. We never had a Christmas. We had a tree. He reluctantly put up, but I never had a good Christmas. So therefore, I exaggerated. There were times when Christmas up here, I'd have 4 or 5 trees. I started collect Christmas because I never had a Christmas as a young kid. I don't want to make that a sad story, but that's the truth.
What was the best Christmas gift you ever got?
$10.
A date.
A date?
A date when I was about 17 years old.
Didn't you get an electrical set?
Christmas time, we used to go to Bloomingdale's.
Right.
And we go to Bloomingdale's because the Bloomingdale's had this great cosmetic area where all these women, girls would go to get the cosmetic. And there was a great place to pick up people. However, there was one other place to do. One other place I found for a great place for girls in the 50s and 60s was church, the 12 o'clock mass. Terrific to pick up dates. Can you imagine that? We went to church to pick up girls, and that's the truth. That's the truth.
What does that have to do with Santa Claus?
Well, it was around Christmas time,
Okay.
midnight mass.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, it's a good
That's a
idea.
great
Yeah.
answer. Okay, go ahead.
But that's how I got into it.
$10 was a lot of money.
$10. That's it. That's it. You give you $10 everybody, and Merry Christmas.
I mean, go.
How did you wind up in Vermont, Lou?
My first wife was a skier. I hadn't been in Vermont. I was born in Brooklyn. I had no idea what the hell skiing was, what Vermont was. And on our honeymoon, supposedly, we got married. We were supposed to come to Vermont, and somehow we ended up in Pennsylvania. I don't know how that happened. However, when we were married, I always had, as a young kid, we always had a country house. I lived in Brooklyn, but he bought a house when I was first born in 1936. He bought a house in Lake Hiawatha, which was a lake community. And I always envied that. I always loved that. I have great memories. So as soon as I could afford it, I bought a second house, and obviously it was in Vermont. In '68, actually, when I went in business, because my wife was a skier. I was a skier, most of the time I was on the snow. But that's how I got to Vermont.
Was that in Chittenden?
I rented Chittenden, same house. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, which we've added to it over the years, but that's how I got to Chittenden and Vermont.
On Bausch Lane.
On Bausch
And the
Lane.
house was built by?
The what?
And the house was built by?
Bausch.
Merlin Bausch.
And repaired by Jack. It's a house that Jack built.
Jack Shortsleeve.
Jack Shortsleeve, good guy.
Sure.
But I've been here a long time. That's how I got to Vermont.
Mr. Bill.
Okay.
Well, I'm very curious. You talk about your professional genesis as being creativity, and I get that. Creativity has some people paint pictures, write operas, poetry, books, theater. What part of your body was broken that took you into medical implements?
Good question. When I got fired the last job, I had a list of companies near the area, And a friend of mine borrowed $1,000 from two guys. I had $2,000. And a friend I was in the Army with, I was in his office. He was supplying the office for free. And I had to go out and develop a business. I had a book, so I went out, and the first client I got was Becton Dickinson. They were a big syringe company. They're still very big now. And I didn't know anything about medicine. I called on them, and I was sitting in it waiting to hear them. And in the hallway was all these medical books. And I started reading the medical books because I figured that if I know more than they know, that's where they hire me. And that was a principle I used all the time. I would try to know more about the product than they knew about the product. And that's how I got in medical. An interesting story about that. It turned me on so much. This is a serious story. It turned me on so much that I wanted to get involved in it. So at that time, there was some small school in New York City that was training PAs, physician assistants. I called them up and I said, I want to be a physician assistant. I'm a veteran. Can I be a physician assistant? The guy says, well, I have to ask you a question. Are you a minority group? I said, well, I'm Italian. He says, I don't mean that. Are you a minority group? And they wouldn't accept me because at that time, because I wasn't a minority group. And I never got involved. But I spent a lot of time in hospitals, watching operations. When I came to Vermont, I spent 10 years in hospice and working in ED. I'm turned on by the whole thing, and it helped me in my business, and that's how I got into medical.
What do you think was the most prolific or your renaissance period in terms of creativity? When do you feel personally? It doesn't have to be with business.
Yeah.
Anytime. Because from my point of view, I'm answering my own question. I probably shouldn't do that. Anyway, that's a big mistake. But is that when you came to Vermont, right? When you retired, you really started to explore not just public service, hospice, things like that, but all the dioramas and things. But from your perspective, what was your most creative time in your life?
That's a hard question to make. I always felt creative. When I wasn't involved, when I had some nipshit job in New York, I was walking around, I would look up and there was McGraw-Hill, a building which was a publisher. I said, one day I'm going to be there. And I used to write short stories until I realized that I wasn't a very good writer. But I used to write stories and I wrote a couple of TV plays, never accepted. So I always knew I had this idea that I wanted to be creative. And my father, one thing he told me, what I think is an interesting story, is that he said, you don't make money with your back, you make money with your mind. And that always stuck with me, and I always felt creative. And as a kid, everybody liked to hang around with me because I would come up with fun games and stuff other than the porno, fun games. That's how I was creative.
I think we're going to have to edit some of those words out. It's okay. It's all good. So, do you think that coming to Vermont was fruitful and productive, and you've enjoyed the last 50-something years being Santa on Bausch Lane? Christmas is big.
Vermont, sir, every weekend. We would come up here almost every weekend. My first wife didn't like the idea, but I liked the idea. I loved the idea coming out. And it was the transition from pressure to New York, doing running business, because every Friday I had to make payroll, to coming up there was relaxing, spending the time, and then coming back, I would generate ideas that I needed for the business. People used to ask me, how could you go up every weekend? How could you? I said, well, very simply, you go on vacation every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks out of the year. I go on vacation every year, every weekend. Every weekend I'm on vacation. But it was fun. The trip up was kind of diffusing, and trip back was getting more excited about what I had to do that creatively. So I found Vermont always generated a creative activity for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the truth.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
I think we need to pull somebody from the audience. Which brave
Let's
person
say it loud.
wants to read one of their questions?
How are we doing? Softball or high tight one?
High tight.
Up to you.
And we'll repeat it. You're not Mike.
You got to reiterate. I'm not going to hear
We
it.
have to repeat it anyway.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, or you can come up and talk into the mic end.
I'll talk nice and loud.
Yeah.
This is actually a question from Maria Fish, a Rotary Club member. You may know Maria longer than we think. She said she went to Notre Dame Academy, and they did a lot with Xavier, where you went to school, I believe.
You better hear it.
Was joint-
You better read it, yeah.
Yeah.
He wants to read, yeah. Go.
Maria Fish
Yes.
is
Maria
asking.
Fish.
She went to Notre Dame Academy, and they did a lot of joint events with Xavier, where you went to school. Things like joint choirs, and she dated a few guys from Xavier, and even went to a few senior proms, but she can't remember their names. And her question is, did she date you?
No. Xavier was a private school, a military school, which I hated, in New York, on 16th Street. And my father sent me there because the next door neighbor, 2 kids went there, and he liked the uniform. I hated the whole years that I was there. But it was a great, when I look back on it, it was a great school. It was military, I didn't like that, but it was a school that kept me, told me what I had to study. I didn't have much freedom, but today I call upon that as one of the better ideas ever. But I never dated Marie Fish.
Well, at least we cleared that up.
I think she would have remembered you.
And here's the other question that maybe people who've been watching the Geppetto Room all these years have never heard. How many times have you actually broken that very enigmatic nose of yours? There is a number. I do know the number. Do you remember the number?
First time everybody in PAL screwing around with boxing a little bit, sometimes playing ball. That'll be 4 or 5 times. One time in an accident, you know. It always had to seem that when I would fall, my nose would come first. I would go like that, I'd fall my nose. How can it crawl in your nose? You know, when I recently broke my femur, I didn't broke my nose, so I broke the trend. But for some reason, every time I fell, my face first.
I think the number is 6
6.
over the time, but you wear it well. Absolutely.
One of the
It's you.
sidebars about having a broken nose and a rough interior. I would show up at places and I looked like I was going to make you an offer you can't refuse. However, it kept me out of a lot of trouble, a lot of fights, because people wouldn't take me on because I looked tougher than I really am.
There's another question from Rotary?
Yes.
All right.
Hello, Lou.
Hello.
See you again. Haven't seen you in
Chuck.
a while.
I miss you
Also
guys.
with Rotary Club.
I miss you guys. Thanks for coming.
The question I have is, at Rotary Club meetings, you would often discuss the most recent health discoveries. Which healthy living practice has served you best?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 sides to that. Up to 85 years old, I didn't have a doctor. I never went to see a doctor. I didn't have a doctor. I didn't have a primary. And after 85, now I got more doctors coming out of my below my hair, doctors, pills, and stuff. So I stayed away from the doctor. I was aware of a lot of medical things. Did I do the right thing? I lived to 85. No, I wouldn't advise it. But the idea that I was kind of conscious of my own health, and when I looked at doctors, they were very. When I would go to being so involved in medicine, this is I'm not critical of them. I was afraid of them. As much information they have the ability to kill you. But right now, I wouldn't advise you not to see doctors. But all those years, all I can say was I thought about it myself. I was reading a lot of medical books. I was not talking to a lot of medical people. I was doing a lot of interviews in hospitals with doctors in OR cases. So I knew a lot about it. I guess that helped me in keeping my health up to 85.
Was that a healthy diet or exercise? Or
Next 3 years, what?
what would you attribute to lifestyle choice? Did you seek out healthier food options? Did you exercise a lot?
I was athletic, and I loved outdoors. I had a positive feeling. I always was positive about things. I always realized one thing, which I'll share with you. Stress is a killer. There's no sense when you have, whatever the problem is, there's no sense in stressing over that problem because the stress doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
When I would have meetings, and I'm going to say this differently, when I have meetings in the morning in my office, I'd say, and people would begin to, what I call kick the dead body, which meant they keep talking about the problems. I say, guys, I know more about the problems than you know more about the problems. Let's talk about the solutions. Otherwise, keep your damn mouth shut. I don't need any more problems. I know problem. So I always was emphasizing positive, and that's the best health exercise I can say. Stress does not solve anything.
That's
It
good
only
advice.
exacerbates what you're trying to do. And there's ways of doing it. And I meditated.
Bill?
That's 2 things. I meditated, and I never allowed stress. I had the ability just to forget about it.
Thank you.
That's the answer, that's the truth.
Good answer.
Yeah, Bill? You got stuff?
This is an odd question. Many years ago, actually twice, I was chair of the Vermont Arts Council, and I remember that the National Endowment of the Arts always would repeat to us that Vermont had the highest per capita concentration of artists of any state in the country. And,
Manhattan,
pardon?
you said Manhattan?
No, Vermont had the
Vermont?
highest concentration
Of creative people.
per capita of artists in the country. And so it's no surprise to me that you came here. But again, your creativity was, I think, in a wonderful way, very focused on how do I help people understand and market what they have? How do I help people understand? And that's, to me, a tremendously important form of creativity. But you're retired now. You're not running an ad agency. What, of all the different art forms, music, reading, what brings you pleasure?
All of it.
Good
I don't have to
answer.
say, no, nothing wrong. I always was an avid reader, prolific reader. And I'm what I call a Reader's Digest reader. Remember Reader's Digest? You get Reader's Digest, and on the cover would be the title. So when I buy a book, I don't read much fiction, I read nonfiction. I look at the table of contents, I pick out the chapters that interest me, and that's the chapters I read. So I read hundreds of books, I don't read the whole thing. I read the chapters that I'm interested in. And that, to me, I am still like that. And I have to pause now because I may not get a chance at the end of the show. It embarrasses me to spend so much time talking about it. Everybody loves to have their ego tapped, certainly me. I've been that vain and so forth. But I appreciate this idea that I can get a chance to talk about myself. I'm a little embarrassed by it. I don't seem that way, but I am, and I want to thank everybody for having given me this opportunity. My son was a surprise at this point in my life, you know. what's left.
Absolutely. There's a question here that kind of piggybacks on the theme that we're talking about now from another enigmatic human being, Mary Feldman. So, and we all love Mary, and she loves you, Poppy.
Mary Feldman.
Yeah, my father has many names. Lou, Louie, Poppy, Lou Scott Alaro, Scotty. That's another family thing. My grandfather's nickname was always Scotty. Right off the boat, Italian man from Naples and Sicily. They used to call him Scotty. But the
It was
real
a way
name,
of hiding.
yeah, the real name is Scott Tallaro. So in the same theme, so yes, you've always been a seeker, always meditating. I think you and Mom, for me, have always been my muse. All of my creativity, all the novels, all the film work, all the prose, everything I've ever done is because of you and her. Everything I've ever written is dedicated to you guys, and that's, everybody who knows me knows that that's my truth. You are the muse. So it's not some, vacuous thing. Anyway, the reading, you were always, prior to Kindle and prior to modern social media, you would go and get cassettes, and you were listening to audiobooks in your car when you were working at LSA for years. There was
Yeah,
always
back and forth, right.
correct. You were always informing yourself. So Mary's question is, maybe you can be specific. What is the mark of a truly well-lived life?
The mark of a very true life to yourself is what you think it is. That's all I can say. Everybody's mark, I don't think there's one thing that marks a perfect life or a true life or whatever life you need. At this point in time, looking back, one of the things, I have no regrets. Looking back now, because I don't have much to look forward to. The idea is that I live every day, but I can't say what the true mark. Everybody has an element of success. I always felt there was enough for everybody, even in as competitive I was. I always felt there was enough for everybody. I still feel that way. And I always felt this is the only thing, that nobody has all the answers. The guy who comes to you who says he has all the answers is nuts. But everybody has some of the answers. So I listen to everybody. So if you do that, then you're going to come up with your own reason for a true life. That's the best answer I could give at this particular
That's a good
point.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, we all have different ways of doing it. So, I don't know if it helps anybody. I don't help you, Mary, but that's the answer.
Lou, I think if there had to be one word to describe you, it would be transformative. So, in your words,
Don't forget paradigm.
what does it mean to be truly transformative in your thinking?
Being eclectic, as I am, eclectic, I like the word transformative. I read the book about if it isn't broke, break it. Now, that book, it originally came out, it was picked up by a lot of corporations as a technique. Now it's in disfavor. But the idea that your original ideas, there's always a better idea, there's always a transformative idea. A transformative idea is an idea that has never been done. It doesn't have any bias. You're not comfortable with it. That's so many decisions in government now, as we see here in the state. The problem is they're comfortable with the idea. They have biases. They're used to them. And those are biases that are built into everybody. You got to overcome that. We're never going to solve our problem, our solve problem in Vermont until we start to be transformative. We can't solve, and Einstein said this. Einstein said you can't solve new problems with old ideas. And that's what we're trying to do. So that's a transformative idea. It's a totally new idea, made up of old things. But it gets out of the idea of bias, used to, comfortable. As soon as you're comfortable with an idea, it's a wrong idea. It's an old idea. And Einstein said, when he said that, he said, you don't solve new problems with old ideas because the old ideas probably created the new problems. So why use them again? He was talking to his own physicists at the time. Because physicists we all have a tendency to hang on to what we feel comfortable with. Wrong, especially today. Especially in light of AI, especially in light of the problems that Vermont has. We can't get comfortable. We got to stay uncomfortable, and that's being transformative.
You mentioned Einstein with the remaining 2.5 minutes or more. Who's your favorite philosopher?
I never had a favorite. I never had a favorite athlete. I never had a hero I looked up to. I just had all of them. I think everybody has something to say. Everybody has something to give you. And you got to listen to everybody. Whether it's a party, I don't care who he is, everybody has so many answers. Nobody has all the answers. If they come to you with all the answers, they're nuts.
As we're winding down, the Rotary has something they wanted to give you.
You said how much earlier you like surprises? So what we have here for you, Lou, all of us that have known you for many years, is a certificate of appreciation presented to Lou Geppetto Scott for his transformative leadership in our club and in our community. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Rutland, we want to give you this certificate of appreciation for all you've done.
Thank
All
you.
right?
Much appreciated, quite obviously. And I
Yeah.
think that question, transformative, and paradigm, right?
A new paradigm.
Ideation, what other adjectives? I mean, you're,
Ideation, paradigm, enrich, enhance. Just find those words a lot. Enhance, enrich.
customer
me.
service.
For me, this is way too sophisticated. My appreciation of him is that when we go to lunch, which we do often, he doesn't eat very much. So
He's a cheap
when
guy.
I'm done my lunch,
He eats his
I
lunch.
eat his lunch, and, it gives you a sense of how deep our friendship is. When he's done, he just pushes his plate over to me.
That's nice. So we're hoping that this is a rejuvenating kind of a push or a nudge to do more Geppetto Room shows.
Yeah.
Okay? So, it's up to you. This is not like some
I
farewell,
will.
but you have 10 seconds. Finish.
I will. Again, it's an ego tap. I really appreciate it. And if I wasn't so hard, I think I'd be tears, but tears come hard to me. But I feel, thank you very much again for all this appreciation, attention. Everybody should actually undergo this. Everybody should have this day where people ask them questions where you can just vomit all your ego, vomit all your philosophies, and nobody's going to criticize you. You just say it. It's terrific. And I'll do it again.
It's therapy. That's what therapy.